Welcome back to the Trashion Icon. I am your host, G. Spencer Morton. Together we will turn crap into couture, garbage into glamour, and trash into trashion. As much as I love Cruella de VIL and these amazing Anthony Powell costumes, we need to address the 101 Dalmatians in the room. Issues with fur. For as long as there have been people, there have been fur fashions. Some out of necessity, some out of style. But in recent history, there has been a strong distaste for fur used in fashion. Because of films like 102 Dalmatians, animal rights activists and fur farm practices have been exposed to the public. People have rallied against the use of fur in fashion since about the 1990s. If the main issue with fur is hurting animals, then just use faux fur and save all the adorable puppies of the world. Because there is a desire for fur, real or otherwise, faux fur has been rapidly developed to create ultra-fine, near-perfect imitations of real fur. Which sounds like a good thing, right? No animals harmed, but I get my fuzzy-wuzzy goodness. Well, it's not quite so simple. Faux fur is just very, very, very fine strands of plastic. These plastics are a major part of the microplastic problems we're seeing today. These faux furs do not last long and start to fall apart after a few months, littering streets, soils, water systems, and other terrains with microplastics. These fine strands are harming insects, microplankton, birds, fish, and all of the animals along the food chain, including us. So really, faux fur is much worse for the environment because it cannot properly decompose, and worse, it's probably killing and harming way more animals in the process. So the fur issue comes down to two things. Do you harm animals for their fur and know where your fur comes from and know that what their fur has been made into will last for decades if well taken care of, making it an heirloom that can be passed down to generations or be reconstructed to reflect current styles? Or B, do you invest in an inferior product that may not be killing animals, but will be harming an unknown number of creatures and fall apart after a few years, where it will not be able to decompose and will only create waste? So do you invest in the real thing that is killing a specific number of animals and can be reused for a long period of time? Or do you spare killing animals but create a bigger issue? Or do you do the smart thing and just not wear any fur at all, but where's the fun in that? On top of the faux fur we use in fashion, we use faux fur in a few other ways. Has anyone else noticed the seemingly sudden popularization of throw blankets and plush interior decor? This is, of course, a reflection of the pandemic making everyone stay home and wanting more comfort and homely coziness. But it does feel like suddenly there are a lot more faux fur pillows and blankets and rugs and slippers and small fuzzy luxuries. All of these contribute to the issue of microplastics as well. Every time you wash one of those synthetic fleeces or faux furs or fuzzy-wuzzy little delights, those fibers shed and get washed into our water systems, affecting fish, birds, and microscopic creatures. Instead of comparing fur to non-fur textiles, a pro-fur study compared a real mink fur coat to a faux fur one. Assuming a real fur coat is typically kept for 30 years compared to a faux fur coat, which only kept for 6. With this assumption, it showed that the faux fur coat poses 4 times more risk of damage to the ecosystem, 2.3 times more risk of adding to climate change, and 2.7 times more risk of impacting resource consumption. Risk to human health was about the same, though that switched in favor of the faux fur if you decide that people will actually keep their faux fur coats for 8 years or more. But then the argument switches again, depending on what fur you're wearing, whether it's rabbit, fox, mink, or something more exotic, it changes the argument of where does your fur come from, and so really, we could talk all day about the complexity of this issue. Ironically enough, when I went to go see the Glenn Close costume exhibition, the only surviving Cruella de VIL costumes with fur were the ones made with real fur. All of the faux fur and fake leather materials deteriorated so much that they could not be displayed and may not even exist anymore. Much to think about. If you would like a more in-depth look at the history of fur, specifically leopard fur, have a look at the absolute gem that is The History of Leopard Print. It's a phenomenal read, very easy to understand, just a pleasure of a book. Back to Cruella de VIL. The world of late 90s fashion was very different from the fashion world we know today. Back in the 90s, we were still riding the high of 80s extravagance and dynasty levels of glamour. Fur was very much in style and highly featured in fashion publications. But this is when the tone began to shift. Groups like PETA were becoming radical in their activism and were unafraid to disrupt the status quo to be heard. You may recall the iconic imagery of red paint being thrown onto fur coats, a practice that is still done and feared by many fur wearers today. This initial act of disruption became a trademark of anti-fur activism. It also acted as a source of inspiration for 102 Dalmatians, which centers strongly around bringing the messages of 101 Dalmatians into modern times, more directly examining the fashion industry of the time and reflecting on the harsher realities through a cartoonish lens. We are also blessed with the gift and underrated treasure that is Jean-Pierre Lepelt, who is a lovingly cartoonish homage to eccentric designers Jean-Paul Gaultier and Mr. Mugler. Both designers shamelessly used fur in their collections at the time. To be fair, if this was a level of artistry they were creating with fur, I can't blame them. Don't act like you don't want to try this coat on and cuddle up with it. God, it looks amazing. So what can we take from all that we've learned about fur and fashion? I currently live in California, and making a Cruella level coat felt like it was contributing to that outdated sense of luxury. So I decided to reflect the values of the time in which I currently live by making luxurious loungewear. One costume we didn't focus on in our last episode was Cruella's house dress, with these long feathered sleeves. These are ridiculous. Oh my god, look at them. Even in her own home, Cruella is always on point with her fashion. I doubt that she was getting all dolled up for Horace and Jasper, but she wanted them to know who was the boss. The ongoing theme of fabulous loungewear for powerful women is one that I deeply appreciate. Wearing an overwhelming fur coat is generally considered tacky or in bad taste today. However, wearing luxurious loungewear is timeless. For as long as there have been rich husbands that have been dying under mysterious circumstances, there have always been fabulous housecoats. Mine is more reminiscent of 1920s and 1930s silhouettes, a la Miss Fisher and John Galliano in the 1990s for Dior. I have been saving up faux furs for the better part of a year to do this project. Being in California, there's not very much faux fur to choose from, but what I found was perfect. I started with this less than inspiring zebra snuggie. Ugh. It was oversized, light, and bold, a perfect starting point. Lucky enough, I found a matching pattern throw blanket. This blanket has a bit more fuzz and weight. I knew I wanted the hem to fan out in the way many 1930s bias cut gowns do, so I cut 3 slits and added panels of the throw blanket into the hem. This gave the coat much more drama and weight and the illusion of real fur. Next, to get that wonderful plush, cuddly collar Cruella's coat has in the cartoon, I used the remainder of the throw blanket to create almost this overflowing collar. One of the things I loved about Cruella's coat, both in the cartoon and in quite a few of the Anthony Powell costumes, was its use of tails. It adds such a menacing and elegant touch, as well as a wonderful shape and detail to all of her coats and wraps and throws. I made a few black and white tails from some fleece and faux fur scarves. I also restored a crumpled vintage hat to resemble the reimagined Philip Tracy hat for Mugler that we saw earlier. As a No matter what side of the issue you fall on, there is one solution at the core: creating Trashion. Either upcycling beautiful fur or being mindful of faux fur waste, both of these are in abundance and need to be used properly to prevent further production. Thank you for joining us on another exciting episode of the Trashion Icon. I have been your host, the Trashion Icon. If you've enjoyed this episode or have any thoughts, feelings, or opinions, please do leave a comment and a like. This show is brought to you by the Sonoma Community Center and the Sonoma Trashion Fashion Show. Check out the 2022 Trashion Fashion Show, April 2nd. Tickets are on sale now. I'll see you on the runway, darling.